Hi guys, Ned DeHaan from blackboxonlineradio here. In this episode you will hear an interview that I did with Scott Bobbitt talking about the Zodiac Killer mystery, but I wanted to pick up with some material from last week's Zodiac Monday, and since the interview was already pre-recorded, I wanted to respond to this at the beginning. And I was discussing the video on Paulscape 72 about the Z32 Cipher, and I made a big mistake in that one, and I want to try and set the record straight now because I can tell that Paul has put in a lot of time and effort trying to work on that Z32 video, and it is one of the better explanations that I've heard on how the Zodiac Killer might have been thinking when he was composing the Z32 cipher. And the first point is that I said something backwards. The Zodiac Killer talked about putting radians on top of Mount Diablo, an angle of 57.29 degrees, and then when he put it on Mount Diablo, one arm of the radian goes to Blue Rock Springs Park, the second Zodiac Killer crime, the other arm goes through Presidio Heights, where Paul Stine was murdered, the final victim. But the point of the Zodiac's Z32 was not to have the locations of the crime scenes mapped out, it was to have the location of a bomb. And Paul has found a way to put everything together very nicely, and the thing that I said backwards involved magnetic north and astronomical north. I was calling it directional north in the video, but if I've got this now, what you do is you set your compass to magnetic north and you adjust for 17 degrees, and you put the radians on Mount Diablo. One arm goes to actually the police station, the SFPD building, and the other can go to Blue Rock Springs Park. And then when you adjust to astronomical north, like when you switch back, then one arm of the angle goes through a place called Paradise Valley, which could have a couple different meanings. Firstly, Paul proposed that it's just a suitable location for the Zodiac Killer to choose, a populated area, as opposed to a rural or swampy area. That would be a more reasonable place for a bomb threat. And also, the Zodiac Killer regularly talked about slaves in Paradise Valley. There could be a connection there. But Paul has also written something out, and he says, a couple of things. Your video makes it look like my grounding proofing of other solutions is from other people. It's a complex multi-model exercise. I checked all profitable areas with 4 radians and 4.5 inches. 4.5 inches was optimal. It was the optimum match. The location name is less important than what Zodiac gave us, the dimensional values that fit the cipher and the environmental match. I agree. The bomb was a joke, and I do say it in the videos. And yes, Paul and I are in agreement that they weren't, the Zodiac Killer most likely was not trying to detonate a physical bomb. I think it was an empty threat, and it seems like Paul is in agreement too. And the Zodiac Killer also created the Z13 cipher, and the Z13 has 13 symbols in it, and Paul has proposed, or not exactly proposed, he agrees with the solution that it's Alfred E. Newman. And yes, Paul was not the first one to come up with that solution, but he agrees with it. Alfred E. Newman, the mascot from Mad Magazine, and he says, I also think it was completely connected to the Z13 AEN solution, Alfred E. Newman solution, given its timing and context. The Z13 is perfectly geometric, symmetrical, with the E in the middle hinting its correct solution. I'm not 100% on the Zodiac knowing landscape architecture, just most probable, same with being a student. The 3 large crosshairs are a key. And thank you so much to Paul for writing this out. And again, I really just invite people to watch Paul's video on the Z32. It's about 36 minutes long, but it's very, very well made. And it's a very neat, orderly, and simple solution. And I'll talk about another one of Paul's videos during the interview. And I would also like to give a shout out to Sam Fisher. As I said, the interview with Scott was pre-recorded, but Sam Fisher also donated on buymeacoffee.com, and anybody who supports the show on buymeacoffee.com will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday, and he is one that I am including in this segment. All right, without further ado, let's play the interview.
BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello, everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? This week on Zodiac Monday, I have the pleasure of being joined by Scott Bobbitt, who is a Zodiac Killer researcher and sleuth, and he's made a lot of observations about the Zodiac Killer mystery. But just a couple of quick announcements and reminders before we begin. The first is that on the channel, The French Wrecking Crew, run by Jerome, there is a new 4-hour live stream that was done as a panel discussion about the Zodiac Killer, and I was a participant in that, along with Ross Geraci from Planet X Filmworks, Drewzer, aka Andrew Gray, and Jerome himself, of course, and that's going to most likely be a regular thing. So I invite you to subscribe to the French Wrecking Crew, and also there's a new video on the channel Paulscape 72. Paul is a landscape architect who has done that for 30 years, and he's made a lot of observations about the Zodiac Killer mystery. And if anything, he makes some very convincing cases that the Zodiac Killer had experience with technical drawing and drafting, and those are the biggest points where I feel very convinced on from watching Paul's videos, and the fourth video is out in his series on the Zodiac Killer design influences. And there is a page for Black Box Online Radio on Instagram, of course, BlackboxNet88, my page. But if you go on Instagram, you can find the page Not Ray Johnson. That's the BBO War fan page. And right now, I would like to get to your supporter shoutouts on buymeacoffee.com. Buymeacoffee.com/blackboxned88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. First, we have one from Batman66. Batman66, thank you so much for your regular and consistent support. And Batman66 has also been helping out a lot with the YouTube Shorts. I release shorts here on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube Monday through Friday, talking about all types of true crime stories. And thanks again, Batman. And we have one from River Prawn Pottery. River Prawn Pottery, I also appreciate everything that you've done, as well as your contribution of the real-life River Prawn Pottery honeybee mug that I use during the live streams now. Thank you so much. And I would like to give a shout out to Dennis G, who has helped a lot finding the images that you're seeing going by on the screen. Thank you, Dennis. And a collective shout out to everyone who left super chats on the live streams. I go live on Tuesdays and Thursdays here on Black Box Online Radio for True Crime Talk Radio in the morning. I did one recently about John Benet Ramsey, but mostly on True Crime Talk Radio, you can talk about any subject. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Scott Bobbitt to the program. Scott, are you with me?
Yes, Ned, how are you doing?
I am doing just fine. Firstly,
Good.
thank you for being a guest on Black Box Online Radio. And I would like to ask you, how did you first get curious about the Zodiac Killer mystery?
That's a really great question. I'm originally from Southern California, and I had briefly heard things about the Zodiac Killer here and there. I watched the movie Zodiac back when it first came out, and to be honest with you, I fell asleep in it, and I didn't really remember anything about it. But in 2018, I went to a family reunion in California, and I was living in Atlanta at the time. And a person that I know there, who I'm actually related to, she's a distant cousin of mine. She told me she wanted to meet with me, and so my nephew and I met with her at a Starbucks, and we just had small talk for a little bit, and she just came out and said, I need to tell you something, that my dad is the Zodiac Killer. And I had no idea what to think or what to do. I was completely blindsided by the whole thing. And so when I got back home to Atlanta from that trip, I started digging in, and I was pulled in. In a nutshell, that's what happened.
And to be clear, you're on the show not to talk about this person's Zodiac Killer suspect, because that's more or less something that got you curious, because as I understand, you have made a lot of observations about the Zodiac Killer mystery, and it goes in a completely different direction, right?
Completely, yeah. I'd come to the conclusion very early on that her father was not the Zodiac Killer. Um, and it just started me on the path to start picking up breadcrumbs and digging in. And once I got into the story, and it unraveled before me with just shocking circumstances and coincidences and circumstances, that I just kept going and going and going, and I unraveled things that I'm here to share with the public and with you. You know, a lot of the things I've already shared with you, Ned. Um, and we got to be kind of careful how this all gets unfolded because there's so much information that I do have. I don't want to overload everybody, but just get out there bits and pieces and let everybody chew on it and see what we can do with it. That's pretty much what my goal was.
And what was your first step during the research process? Did you look at suspects? Did you look at the Zodiac Killer's letters? Did you look at a map of California? Did you look at the ciphers? What was the first part of your research journey?
Well, what's ironic was when I first started my research, the hunt for Zodiac was just coming on the air. It was like a 5-part History Channel thing came on, and the real thing that and then of course I watched the movie, the Robert Downey Jr. and Jake Gyllenhaal movie of Zodiac, and then the one thing that really opened up a lot of stuff for me was the documentary that is on. I saw it on YouTube. It was like an hour and 45-minute documentary. I probably watched it 100 times. Called "This Is the Zodiac Speaking." So I dug into everything. I went on in podcast. I researched Wikipedia. I was in anything I could get my hands on. Um, that's where I just started downloading as much information as I could.
And it sounds like you would use the expression "you went down the rabbit hole." Out of curiosity, how did you find Black Box Online Radio?
Um, well, there I was, the other thing that I'm really interested in is in the DB Cooper case. And so I was just Googling or checking on YouTube one day for Zodiac Killer and DB Cooper, and yours came up as a hit that interact with both of those cases. And that was specifically what I was looking for.
Okay, yes, and as Scott said, in addition to Zodiac Monday, I also do a segment every Friday about DB Cooper, Cooper Friday. And if you want to follow along with all of these true crime discussions, you can hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Okay, though, Scott, so you're going down the rabbit hole. You're watching all of these Zodiac documentaries and listening to podcasts and watching videos and reading articles. But what are some of the observations that you have made about the Zodiac case that you believe are original?
Well, when you say original, I think what you're referring to is the cards. Most people spend their time trying to, break ciphers and figure those out. Most of those have been, uncovered since I started this. I mean, I think History Channel uncovered one of them pretty good. I think at least half of it, and then the other one was solved 2 or 3 years ago. Um, I didn't. I got into the ciphers and I tried different things. I took the Halloween card and I took and I printed it out and I took an X-Acto knife and I cut the little eyes all out and then I tried overlaying that as a mask key over the top of the ciphers, and I was just I was like, this could end up taking up my entire life. So what I ended up doing was studying the psychology of the Zodiac and really getting into his head. And so in doing that, I started focusing on his cards, his artwork, because from my research, I could tell that he had purchased some of the cards and then altered them to fit what he was trying to say. And all of the answers that I found, the pattern and the key that I found to unlock who he was and what he was doing, were in the cards, the drawings, and the pictures that he drew.
Now, Scott, you and I have had a chance to talk about this offline. So, would you say a fair assessment of your observations would be that the Zodiac Killer left very, very intricate messages in the greeting cards? And I hope people will approach this with an open mind, but you're believing that the Zodiac left clues to his identity in the artwork in the greeting cards. And it goes a little bit beyond some of the general observations that other people have made that, oh, well, maybe the pumpkin on the Halloween card means this. You have made a lot of in-depth um, theories and hypotheses about the artwork. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I believe with law enforcement, and before I even tell you this or say this online, was when I first put all this together, I did take it to the FBI. I don't think they took me serious, but then again, they might have, and they wanted to just cover it up. I don't know. I kind of got the impression both ways, so I don't know. But to answer your question, is absolutely in the artwork, and we'll go over all that. There is information in there that can absolutely tie him to specific physical things that were registered in medical documents. Now, do I have access to those? No, I don't. But if we could get the right people who do have access to certain documents in government to connect those dots, they could definitely link it to the person who I consider is my person of interest. And it's a name that's not out there right now. The only one that really has this person as a suspect. So, and I know that's hard for a lot of people to swallow when they hear a new name, because everybody's got their favorite, person. But my person is a completely somebody that nobody's ever heard of before.
All right, so your research journey ultimately brought you down to finding your own suspect. However, is there a particular greeting card that you would like to talk about first? Perhaps the Halloween card, or maybe one of the other ones? Where would you like to begin?
Well, I want to start with the Mount Diablo map first, because that is part of his artwork. Even though it's a printed map, he did draw on it to explain certain things. That's where my whole unlocking the key to his little kingdom there was in the Mount Diablo map, because what it did, and I'm going to mention other people's names here from their research and work and books. I don't know what all the legalities of that, but I do want to give credit where credit's due, because these people gave me the pieces of the puzzle that I used to put together my own image. Was it started with I never read Mike Cole's book, but I did find online his hypotheses about the airports being linked to the Mount Diablo map on the radian lines. He did something there, and he started drawing a line off of Mount Diablo, and he said, there's a pattern here. These lines, these radian lines, are heading to all of these different airports. So that is where I started with that. Um, and I would literally lay in bed and stare at that Halloween card and be like, what the heck? What is this about? What is this all about? What is he trying to say here? There's more going on. So I I I tried to get some 3D glasses when I first started looking at the Halloween card, and the red and blue lenses, and I couldn't find any. So I went to like Office Depot or Staples or one of those places and bought these transparent keychains. And one was red and one was blue, and I had one on each eye. And I bought black lights, I bought red lights and blue lights. I did everything just to see if there was anything hidden in there, because I was studying in the ciphers. There's this thing called steganography, I think it's called, where you can hide certain images, and if you have a red lens, it will start to appear. Well, I didn't really find anything like that, but when I was looking in the background of the Halloween card, I saw like a question mark and a 6, and they're pretty clear, and I didn't know what they meant. And so David Gold, I'm not completely a hugest fan of David's work, but I do respect his enthusiasm. And he planted a little seed in my head, so he does get some credit for this. He talked about, he's like, oh, Zodiac and DB Cooper's the same person, and he the airplane is in the eye of the skeleton on the front of the card. Well, I looked and I'm like, well, I see something there. Maybe it does look like a little bit of an airplane, but he put that in my head, so I don't know if I'm suffering from conformatory biases. I'm seeing something that I want to see. I don't know. So that seed was planted in my head.
Well, yes.
Once I
Oh,
Go
please
ahead, I'm
continue.
sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, excuse me, I thought you were finished, that David Gold, of course, it runs a YouTube channel, and he has a book out there called My Dance with the Zodiac Killer, and his suspect is named Frank Lee Morris, among others. He has 3 suspects, actually. And what I find is so much more valuable to discuss is not only who was the killer, who's suspect does this person have, but also the observations that people can make about something. Because even if you don't think that Franklin Morris was the Zodiac killer, I certainly don't. This thing you said about you looked at the Halloween card and you thought that one of his observations about the Halloween card could be accurate. Well,
Right.
okay, then fair enough. And I think that those things are more beneficial in a lot of ways because you're looking at different parts of the case. And when people just look only at the suspects, it's almost like a tunnel vision way of exploring this mystery. Now,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
but I've heard a lot of things from you just right then and there. And you said that the Zodiac Killer has a connection to airports and airplanes. And would you like to share more about that?
Yeah, I would. That was the key that unlocked everything. One night, I was probably 3 or 4 months into this rabbit hole. I was focusing on the 14 on the skeleton's hand and also the 4-teen on the inside of the Halloween card. And I grew up around airplanes a lot. So I know I never officially got my pilot's license, but I used to fly small aircraft. And it was just too expensive for me. I was a carpenter and such, and I just couldn't afford it. But one day I had I had turned the card upside down, and I looked at the 4-teen upside down, and I noticed that it was an N33, and then it was something I couldn't make out. I wasn't sure if it was an upside down T or an L, and then the 4, I said, okay, that looks like an H digitally. If you look at it like a digital clock, the digital numbers on a microwave, the letters now appeared to be N33LH. Well, the first thing I did is I ran on the internet N33TH, and it came up with an airplane from like 1995 or something, like a twin-engine aircraft. I knew that that was too new of an aircraft. And I put in N33LH. Now, I hate putting this information out there, and this is one of the reasons I've held off on going public with this information so long, because I don't know the legal ramifications of telling somebody's N number on their airplane, but it was an N number on an airplane, and it was a 1968 Piper Cherokee that was 3 months off the showroom floor at the time of the first murder. And when I looked at Mike Cole's map online of the Mount Diablo to it pointed to Buchanan Airport, which is just northwest of Mount Diablo. And the Phillips 66 map is cut off there. So I didn't, you couldn't see anything past that. Well, I got on Google Earth and I used the measuring ruler on there to draw a line from Mount Diablo to Buchanan Airport. And then I just kind of stretched it out and I noticed that there was another airport in line with that, past it, that is not on the Phillips 66 map, but it's perfectly in line. And that's Napa County Airport. And when I did that, I highlighted that yellow line that Google Earth makes on there. And lo and behold, both of the first murders were on that line. The Lake Herman and the Blue Rock Springs were exactly on that line, and it headed right to Napa County Airport. And so that's uh, we can take a break from there, but the airplane, the N number was my first indication that he was trying to show he understood navigation by talking about magnetic north and the radians. I was certified for scuba diving when I was 15. So we learned about, you know, declination and deviations on compasses and stuff. And then when I started flying in airplanes, I learned about even more in depth. And so when I saw the Phillips 66 map, I was like, this guy was trained with compasses by either scuba diving or flying or both, which is ironic because Arthur Lee Allen did both of those things, and he's definitely not my suspect at all. But my suspect is also Navy and also heavily involved with scuba diving, though I did not know that he had anything to do with aircraft, except for the fact that he did talk about it at certain times from my investigation. So there's that. There's the airport connection in the airplane, the N number. So I hope
Yes.
that
Oh,
I hope
sorry.
that I hope that doesn't cause a lot of problems for the people that own the airplane. If anything, if this all does get out and people do uncover the truth, and hopefully they'll make, you know, their airplane will be very infamous. But it just to put the connection to Zodiac to anybody that's not expecting it or seeing it coming is a frightful thing for me to think that I would have anything to do with that. But I don't have any. I just can't keep this stuff private anymore. Because I just got to take a risk and put it out there and hope for the best.
Right. And Scott, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show was your observations did not seem completely far out. Like, say, for example, David Gold is, of course, talking about Frank Lee Morris, the suspect from the escape from Alcatraz, and the other two guys, John and Clarence Anglin. Those are his Zodiac Killer suspects. That's
Of
a very
course.
far out theory. But your observations were more just that you were examining the Halloween card and other things like the Phillips 66 map very closely, and it appeared that the Zodiac may have inserted just some numbers and letters in a very, very intricate and hidden way. And that didn't seem far out at all, because that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you here on Black Box Online Radio and just look at these types of clues and observations and see where we could go. But you
Okay.
brought up another Zodiac suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, and you've
Hmm.
also said some things about how Arthur Lee Allen also had a naval background, as does your suspect, whom we'll get to later. Arthur Lee Allen was involved with diving, and Arthur Lee Allen did have an interest in planes, and he well, he goes on to just develop a bigger interest in planes as his life goes on. Why isn't Arthur Lee Allen the Zodiac Killer?
I mean, all the handwriting analysis, all the DNA evidence, everything, they always cleared them. And to be honest with you, like I can't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that my person of interest is the Zodiac Killer, but I'm in my heart, in my mind, and what I know and what I've seen and added and put together, it absolutely is him. And I'm sure a lot of people are rolling their eyes right now. But that's why, I mean, I did my investigation on Arthur Lee Allen. I did. And Robert Graysmith makes great points. And we all learned so much from Robert. Thank you, Robert, for all the work you've done. Is he the Zodiac? I don't think so. I think it's possible that my suspect and Arthur Lee Allen may have even known each other. Maybe they both did it together. I don't know. There's things that I don't know. Um, but it's possible that he was involved because it is known that he did frequent Lake Berryessa. A lot of those Navy guys hung out up there and went fishing and scuba diving up there because Mare Island is right there next to Napa County Airport, which is like, if you look it up on Wikipedia, it's like the premier uh you know naval marine naval yard of the Pacific Fleet, and is right, it almost touches the airport. So I'm sure all those guys knew each other. And my suspect never mentioned that he knew him. He never mentioned anything about the Zodiac Killer um, in my time of knowing this person. But um, it's very possible Arthur Lee Allen did have something to do with it. I don't know that. All I know is what I uncovered on the cards, and we'll go more into the depth on that if you want to, but I will explain to you more of what I found if you want to do that.
Well, absolutely, because I just wanted you to talk about Arthur Lee Allen because you brought him up. And this is really a chance for you to talk about your observations. Now, you've gone through the Phillips 66 map, the Zodiac Killer's Halloween card. Is there another document that you have examined closely that you'd like to share some findings with us?
Well, I mean, I can keep going on the Halloween card to explain more about the airplanes, or I can just kind of cover other stuff. It's up to you. What do you think?
I would like to continue with the Halloween card then, because right now I've heard a couple things from you. The first is that you can see an airplane in the eye of one of the skeletons, and the second is that there is a number that's been hidden into the Halloween card that appears to, well, we're not even going to say the number because you said it might trace back to somebody's airplane, but the Zodiac openly said on the Halloween card, I know you hate to know my name, but why spoil the game? Something to effect of that. So
Right.
I'll clue you in, and not giving his legal name or anything immediately, but giving something like a number to an airplane that he might have been in contact with. That would be a very, very subtle way of handing Paul Avery his identity. So those are
Right.
two observations that we've heard so far. What would be something else you've observed about the Halloween card?
Okay. Well, other connections that there could be now, the records might not exist anymore, but I started hypothesizing, okay, um, I'll make all the connections together to bring you into Napa County Airport, that is, in fact, where he was landing and operating out of. Was when I started really dissecting the cards with my knowledge of, airplanes and airports and stuff like that. I started looking for other hidden numbers in there, and a lot of people can't see it until I show them. Like I have a weird brain when it comes to seeing things that a lot of people can't see, but once I show it to you, you're like, oh my god, and then you can never erase it. There's a word for it. I forget what it is, but I see things when I look at pictures. So I started seeing numbers hidden, very cleverly hidden and drawn all over the cards. And if you look at the right foot of the skeleton, from the skeleton's perspective on the front of the card, the one with the pumpkin, I found it was a 36 on his right foot from his perspective, and I found an 18 on the left foot. Well, when I looked at that, I was like 36 and 18 are opposite numbers on a compass rose, which is a compass. So the way that runways get their numbers is based upon the compass rose. So if 36, runway 36 actually means 360 degrees on the compass rose. You don't put the zero, you just say 36 for heading 360, which is true, which is dead north. And the opposite of dead north is directly south, which is 180, which would be runway 18. We don't say runway 180. So when I saw when I saw it on the right foot, the 36 and the 18 on the left foot, I was like, that's runway numbers. And when I went back and looked at the runway numbers at Napa County Airport, lo and behold, it was runway 36 one direction and 18 the opposite direction. Now, there's two parallel runways. Um, so there's runway right and runway left. So based upon what I was seeing in the picture, he used the small runway. There's a bigger runway and a smaller runway. If you go on Google Earth now, it's gonna show like runway one, and they changed it because the declination, the magnetic field changes every year. And so they updated it a couple years ago so that it doesn't say runway 36 and 18 anymore. But you can find pictures online that show it. You can look it up what the runway numbers were. And so I started with that. I was like, this guy is a pilot. He's doing everything from the air. And when I started really studying the skeleton, I realized this is a map. I'm looking at a map. He shows what airplane he has. He shows his tail number. He shows what runway he's using. He's showing in the radians point to Napa County Airport. And then the other things that I started finding in there was when you look at Napa County Airport from above at the right angle, if you're facing it from the south looking north, it looks like a Masonic compass and square. Now there's no G in the middle, but it is a compass with a square, at an angle. And I've done a lot of studying of Freemasonry my life, and I recognize the symbol on his little brand that he made that said, Zodiac on the bottom. And I recognized what is known as a tubal cane symbol. If you ever notice on the back of a car of a master mason, there'll be like a little golf club that is upside down, with the head of the golf club sticking up with two golf balls on each side of it, which represents two balls and a cane. And when you look at his symbol, he's got a two ball cane to the left and he's got a two ball cane to the right with an extra little dash sticking off to the right. And I was like, and now two ball cane, a lot of masons use that. Yeah, it goes back all the way into biblical times, and Noah and stuff, where Tubal Cain was the guy who introduced metallurgy and weaponry to mankind, and his name was Tubal Cain. Well, the codes that the Masons use is two balls and a cane is part of their undercover little secret thing, and it's also, some people say, the origins of where 007 comes from. The two circles or O's or balls, and then the seven is the cane. And so I started, just reading into his symbols. Another thing that I found in the symbols was, if you in meteorology, which is very common for pilots to read these charts, there's what are called wind barbs. And somebody else mentioned this online. I don't know who it was, so I can't take credit for it, but they were saying that that symbol looked like these wind barbs, and there's a whole code incorporated in wind barbs by how many dashes it has sticking off of it and the direction it's heading. And you can calculate numbers off those wind speeds and directions. So as far as seeing an airplane in the eye of the skeleton, I never claimed that I can see an airplane in the eye. It was David Gold who said there's an airplane in the eye. And I started looking for it, and I'm like, maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't know. But that's where the original Mike Cole and David Gold both brought up airplanes, and it started something in me to start looking at these things. So, um,
All right, though, Scott, but you have shared a lot of things in that response there. And I know that you're going to be aware that you're going to get some pushback. For example, what is your response to people who think that there are not these types of intricate hidden messages in the greeting cards? Not specifically like hiding a number somewhere on the greeting card, but this thing about the Masonic connection. What would you be your response to people who would just say that's a wild conspiracy theory?
well, I would say that the Zodiac was a wild conspiracy theorist. that's that's
Please
I
continue.
mean, when you look at everything he did, this is the way I see him psychologically. When you watch the Jim Carrey movie, The Cable Guy, I see Chip. That's what the Zodiac Killer is to me. He's like Chip. He was involved with all these movies and stories. He was the antagonist and the protagonist. And I believe he created his own character who was a misguided or misunderstood protagonist. That's who I see him as in his own eyes. That's what I think he sees. I don't think he sees himself as an evil person. When I explain all the things that I do know about this person, I believe he thinks he was doing a good thing. Um, I don't think he sees himself as some evil bad thing. It's why he would say things. There's a religious connection I have to this. We'll go into that later, but he was like, don't put anything nasty on the buttons, like Melvin's. Um, he didn't rape the girls. He didn't steal from them or rob them. He was killing. But when you know the religious background and thinking of this individual in the time frame that it happened back in the 70s and what was going on then, I believe he thought he was doing good. And he created this whole persona. And, you know, my suspect back when these things happened, I do believe that the Robert and Linda killing was the same person. And he would have been, well, my suspect was born in 1946. And so do the math on that. I think I calculate he would have been 16 or 17 years old at the time of that. And I do believe he did that. But at the time of the actual, like 68, 69, he would have been 21, 22, or something like that. It's been a while since I've done the math. Like I told you the other day, I haven't thought about this case for like, it's popped in my mind a little bit here in the last 2 years, but I like pretty much had to give it up because nobody was following what I was saying, and I didn't know who to discuss it with. I took it to the FBI. I went to police. I talked to detectives in California, and I don't know what they did with it, but I never heard back from them. I guess they got just too busy with their own stuff. So we have to handle this ourselves.
Well, you
So
brought up the murders in 1963, but there's a bigger question that I have to ask, just for the
okay,
audience to be very clear. When you
okay.
said there's a religious connection, do you believe that the Zodiac was trying to commit murders in some type of Masonic ritual?
I would say yes.
Okay, so,
I,
but
I
that's
think he I think it was a hybrid. It was not just Masonic. Masonry is not a religion, though it is religious in nature, is what a Mason would tell you. He my personal interest was a Jehovah Witness, a new up and coming Jehovah Witness who had studied every religion, every facet in Masonry, and knew a lot about theocratic things. Okay. And what was going on with the Jehovah Witnesses in those days was they were all preparing for the end of the world to happen in 1975. Okay. And basically, the reasoning was the way that Jehovah Witnesses believe is that Armageddon's coming. And if you're not a Jehovah Witness when Armageddon comes, you're toast. But there's a loophole to get in. They don't believe you're going to die and go to heaven. They believe they believe that if you make it through, that God will restore the earth back to a paradise, and that's where that term paradise comes from, in the zodiac card. But so the loophole to get in, if you die when Armageddon comes, you don't get to go in. You're gone. But if you die before Armageddon comes, you will be brought back to life in what they call the resurrection to get in. So I believe Zodiac thought if he was killing these people, I think he did it for two reasons, or many reasons, but I think he wanted to scare everybody into wanting to become a Jehovah Witness. First of all, that's what I honestly believe. Second of all, I think he thought that the people that he was killing would get a ticket into paradise before Armageddon came. And I do believe, with all that I know about this case, that that is what was in his mind. Now, was it misguided? Most definitely, and highly likely, yes. So, but you got to realize the Vietnam War was going on. People, they were, napalming kids and women and children, entire villages. It was a war going on, and people were dying left and right. And I think he saw himself as some superhero. And remember Chip on the Cable Guy? He goes into like medieval times restaurant, and he's playing, Captain Kirk, at one minute, and the next minute he's playing some knight. And I that's how I see the Zodiac. He put all of these different characters in there. I 100% believe he came up with the name Zodiac based off of what Tahoe 37, I believe, is what her handle
Tahoe
is.
27.
Was it 27 or 37?
Yeah, Tahoe 27.
Okay, so that in Tahoe 27, she came up with the theory about Dr. Zodiac from Charlie Chan and Treasure Island. Well, my person of interest was discharged with a dishonorable discharge from the United States Navy. He was stationed in Hawaii in Pearl Harbor. He was discharged in Treasure Island, San Francisco. And I 100% believe that he picked that name based off of that, because I don't know if he took an airplane to Treasure Island from Honolulu, or he took a ship. I don't know. I didn't get that out of him, but he did specifically tell me he did go from Hawaii to Treasure Island to be discharged with a dishonorable discharge. And the reason he got a dishonorable discharge was because when he was in the Navy, he decided he wanted to become a Jehovah's Witness. And they court-martialed him 7 times, and they threatened to kill him in a firing squad. And it was all over the newspapers. And, it went like worldwide, the story. And he was teaching the Bible to everybody in the jail there in the barracks. And, it was a big to do. I think he got addicted to that attention in the newspapers and being on front page and all this stuff. That was like 1968 that probably happened, or no, probably 1966, I think it was. And so I don't know how he got to Treasure Island, but I do know he was discharged with a dishonorable discharge there. There's just so many connections of my person of interest and why I believe that, and I've studied everybody's input. So many people gave me pieces of the puzzle that I've never even talked to in person. I just studied their stuff online. But I took all of those pieces with my knowledge of this person and my knowledge of the religion and my knowledge of airplanes and scuba diving, and just for whatever reason I was picked to find these things. And I don't claim that my person of interest is, I can't prove it. I can't prove it. All I can do is share my information, and my intention is not to discredit this person. My intention is not to judge the Zodiac. My intention is, I feel like I got imposter syndrome knowing all the information I got, and I can't even go in a group of people and really honestly be myself, knowing the stuff that I know and hiding it from everybody, because it's like, how can you know all that and not be able to tell anybody? But I've tried to tell people, and everybody's like, dude, you're schizophrenic, you're bipolar, you're fucking, I mean, you're crazy. You have to beep that out. Sorry. You're crazy. That's just all I ever get is, you're crazy. So when I started finding people like you that know the case, that I could actually explain it to and you could see it, that was my motive. This is about me and my healing and me being happy. This is not about attacking the Zodiac Killer. It's not about condemning him or judging him. I don't have anything against this person. That's between him and, in my opinion, God. But I want this out there. I want it confessed to the world. I don't want it on my desk anymore.
Well, we have so many things to respond to in that one. But well, I want to go back to some things, because you said one researcher whom you agreed with, or at the very least, his observations about the case allowed you to make some additional observations that you maybe think he was going down the right track. And his name was Michael Cole, author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy. And he also runs a website and an Instagram page, although he doesn't post super frequently. But with Michael Cole's observations, as you said, he does a lot with angles. He's an engineer, so he understands radians and how they could be employed in the Zodiac case. But Michael Cole also believes that a lot of the unconfirmed Zodiac incidents were indeed the Zodiac Killer, starting with the 1963 murders of Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards at Gaviota Beach, or south of Gaviota Beach, excuse me. We call it the Gaviota shooting. And you've already stated that you believe that was the Zodiac. Now, the next question that I have for you is, which other unconfirmed crimes, the pre-canonicals we can call them, do you believe was the Zodiac? Would you like me to just kind of go in order with them, and you can kind of tell me what you think, or?
You can do it that way. I'll just answer yes or no and tell you why.
Do you believe your suspect committed the 1964 swindle murders? And let's just say, do you believe the Zodiac Killer committed the 1964 swindle murders?
You give me a little bit more about that one. I'm not super. What is this swindle murders? That one I'm not super.
That's the murders of Johnny Ray and Joyce Swindle, who were murdered in Ocean Beach. They were gunned down from a distance, and it appeared that the perpetrator was walking closer. They were the newlywed couple. This occurred in 1964.
I do remember this one.
This would be about. Go ahead.
I do remember it now. And there was also a taxi cab driver killed right there too, right? In the same time period?
Well, that was the murder of Ray Davis in 1962. So that would be about, goodness, that's about almost 2 years before, because the Ray Davis was murdered in the spring of 62 and the Swindles are murdered in February of 1964. So if you want to begin, well, the reason why I began in 1963 is Michael Cole starts the Zodiac activity in 1963, and you said you agreed with a lot of his observations.
Yeah.
Let's go with the murder of Ray Davis in 1962, the taxi driver that's killed in Oceanside, California, and somebody's making these phone calls saying, I'm going to pull something real nasty in Oceanside and you're never going to figure it out. Ray Davis is murdered, and then this person also makes another threat saying, I'm going to get me a bus driver next. Paraphrasing, of course, but do you think that was the Zodiac Killer?
I every one of those unconfirmed cases that I studied down in that part of the country, I did think, based on the phone calls that he made or the letters or whatever, that it did sound like him. I don't know if it was him, but there's something to do with taxi cab drivers, because there was another one down there in Poway, Nikki Benedict. Do you know that one?
Yes, Nikki Benedict was murdered, though, in 1967. Do you think that was the Zodiac?
Okay, well, she was murdered and stabbed with a knife, and then there was a taxi cab driver killed at the same time, they believe by the same person. Do you know about that one?
Is that Larry Hargis? Or
I
is that...
do. I do believe that his name was Larry. I do believe that. Yes. So that pattern in that time frame, my person of interest was stationed and went through basic training for the Navy in Camp Pendleton, which is right there. And when I hear the letters and the writing and the mind, the psychology of this person, yes, I do believe he was involved with all of the taxi drivers and all the other people that were killed along with it, and the couples. And yes, I do. I don't have as much information about those cases or as much knowledge, but when I did study them, I wouldn't say I was convinced, but I was like, this sure looks like the same person. Sure sounds like it, the same MO, the same taunting. You're never going to figure it out. I'm smarter than you. Yeah, the whole, you got to realize, if my suspect is that person, how young he was, and if my person of interest is that person, and you understood the life he grew up in, how screwed up his head would be. So that's why I don't say I'm harshly judging this person, because you can only go through so much before your head's going to be really screwed up and you're going to do stuff like that. And looking for attention, like Chip on the cable guy, the whole point of that was he went nuts because he was raised by his TV. And that's pretty much what my person of interest was raised. But not only that, he had to raise his sister, and his parents were never home. He lived with his single mom. His dad was gone when he was 5. So I'm not justifying killing. Never. I'm not doing that. You can justify killing. You can't justify murder. There's a difference between killing and murder. And these murders were definitely unjustified in my mind, but I believe in his head, maybe they were justified in his head. I don't know. That's a little bit of a tangent, but those beach ones, the down in San Diego and whatever, yes, it all to me sounds like Zodiac. Same person. Absolutely.
And for the audience, I just got the date right here. Larry Hargis was murdered on June 25th of 1970, but it was one of the Southern California murders. And it's even included in an article on ZodiacCiphers.com called South of Riverside that discusses the murder of Nikki Benedict and Larry Hargis. All right, though, so we got to go through this one by one because we've talked about Michael Cole's observations. But I want to know really what you think about how and why the Zodiac Killer was doing this. Why was the Zodiac targeting these people in Southern California? And then why would he switch in 1969 to all of a sudden giving himself this name Zodiac? Because I know it's a big question, but we have the murder of Ray Davis, the murders of Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards, the Swindle murders. And we haven't even talked about Sherry Jo Bates yet. We probably should, but then you said the murder of Nikki Benedict in 1967.
Mm-hmm.
So this person would have been a very prolific serial killer. Yes. And why would he switch to giving himself this persona in 1969?
I'll give you the answers to that. I 100% believe, and I don't want to go too deep into this right now because there's way too much more to cover, but I believe he was a copycat killer of the Texas Moonlight Murder or the Phantom Killer in Texas from 1946. I believe he was a copycat killer, is how he started. And why he started doing that is a long story, and we're not going to get into that tonight. But I think he wanted to find his own identity, and he was studying all kinds of stuff. He was studying Bible stuff, demonology, astrology, you name it, he was studying it. And I believe he just came up with the zodiac. And because in masonry or any hermetic sciences, like I told you before, most people are very familiar now with the term as above, so below. And what was it called? Chariots of the Gods came out back then, and Footprints of the Gods, or whatever it was called. And I believe he was seeing that stuff. So everything he was doing was from the air looking down, from his airplane looking down at the land like a map. So I think he just came up with this whole idea and created this persona. And the zodiac is like covers everything. And my person of interest, like another thing with the zodiac, his zodiac sign, my person of interest, is a scorpion, is the Scorpio, because his birthday is October 30th, which, speaking of Sherry Joe Bates, her murder was on October 30th. My person of interest birthday is October 30th, 1946. So he would have been 20 years old in 1966 when that murder took place. It was 66 or 68 that took place. I think it was 66, right?
The murder of Sherry Joe Bates is 1966, but to be clear, your POY had his birthday on October 30th?
Yes, his birthday is October 30th, 1946, 100%. And
Okay, sure. Please continue.
okay, so with the Sherry Joe Bates murder, I 100% believe that was him. Absolutely, because I know he had, my person of interest had a house within a few miles of there. Years after that happened, it would have been like 78, 70, probably around 77 or 78. He had a house within 3 miles of that college. Um, Now, did he live over there before then? I don't know, but I do know he's connected to that area right there. And when you read the writing, when you see all that stuff, like even the writing on the desk, like the girl who told me, my cousin who told me her dad was the Zodiac, she said, "Oh, my dad was on to this crazy revelation stuff and is talking about the red horses with RH is the signature." Well, I'm not convinced that that's what that meant. I think it meant Robin Hood. He is every character. When you talk about, um, like when you ask why the name Zodiac, I think he kind of combined. His name was Joaquin Marietta. Do you know who that is?
No, I don't.
Yeah, Joaquin Marietta was a Mexican guy back in California back in the 1800s, I believe it was, and his story is the story that Zorro is based on. Okay, and the pumpkin is another airport. I'm not going to get into too much of it right now, but there's an airport. There's runway numbers on the pumpkin stem, and the ribs and the neck are rectangular shaped bones. There's 14 of those, which there was actually more on the card, but he covered them up. So there's 14 exposed bones, and there's a 32 hidden on the stem of the pumpkin. And those are runway numbers. 140's opposite. 140's opposite is 320. And so when I found those two numbers, I started looking, what is the significance if this skeleton with the pumpkin on it is a map of California. It's a upside down map of California is what it is. And the head of the skeleton is actually Southern California, and the feet of the skeleton is actually, the San Francisco Bay Area. And now this all sounds super far stretched until you start seeing the other cards, and then it becomes more and more undeniable that he's drawing maps. Would you not agree after what I showed you off
Well,
air?
I actually have to respond in a different way because I really wanted to talk to you about all your observations regarding the greeting cards, and then it looks like, partially due to my line of questioning, we got diverted into the non-canonical crimes and the pre-Zodiac murders.
Okay.
Now, I guess you've shared, though, your take on the pre-Zodiac crimes. You believe that they were indeed from the same killer. Now, the original thing we started out was by talking about the Halloween card and how the Zodiac may have inserted secret messages into the unconfirmed, or sorry, into the greeting cards. Is there a different greeting card that you would like to continue with? Maybe the dripping pen card or the dragon card?
Um, the dragon pen card, in real basically, I mean that's like 10 shows to explain that whole thing. But basically, the dragon card. Well, we really can't go too much into that right now. But the dragon card is a map with an entire plan, and it does involve his bomb, the blast, and what that bomb actually means, what the dragon represents, what the little pony represents with its little horseshoes, and there's snow on the ground. It is a entire plan that he did, and Ned and I both agreed not to disclose too much about that tonight because it'd be overload everybody. But it is a map. Um, it's actually a map of Puget Sound and in Portland, Oregon, in that area, and Seattle. It's a map from above. The snowman card, it's a map of Portland, Oregon. The murder of Donna Lass, 100% is Zodiac, because when I decoded the 13 hole punch card, it 100%. I'm just gonna break that one down for you real quick. When he says peek through the pines, that is also there's not a map in there, but there's a image from the air that you'd be looking for, and it is in regards to a place called Bass Lake, and it has a little village there called the Pines. It's right on the Sierra Nevada mountains just south of Yosemite, and all of that stuff. And when you're flying over that area on Google Earth, there's a mountain peak called Glass Rock or Glass Mountain or something like that, as in Donna Lass, but glass, which the way that the rocks are, if you look at it just right from a high enough altitude, it looks like a big 13. So he says it's the 13th victim or whatever, and it says it's just one big 13th. And I've discussed all this with the detectives in Madera County. Like, I have the emails, I've talked to them on the phone. He helped me find the airport that's not even in Bass Lake anymore. And he's like, dude, you're not going to believe this, but my partner here is a pilot. He said there used to be a runway in Bass Lake. And I'm like, well, dude, I looked, there's nothing there. So I went back through the internet and we found, he said, it's right in this area right here. And I finally found a little thing somewhere in the dark web that showed there was an airport there. The snowman card, like I said, is a map of Portland, Oregon. And I'm not saying that there was necessarily any Zodiac murders up there, although there are a few things that happened that I do suspect he did do, but that's not the main reason he made those cards of the dragon card and the snowman card. The dripping pen card, to decode that one, um, when you talk about the religious aspect, a Jehovah Witness is kind of a hybrid between a Jewish person and a Christian. You know, they both come from this, Old Testament and New Testament blended together is what a Jehovah Witness is, kind of a messianic Jew, if you will. Circumcision is not completely, it's not complete. I'm not going to even say complete. It's not required at all to be a Jehovah Witness to be circumcised, but it is heavily explained within the religion. All Jehovah Witnesses are highly aware of what it represents and why, it was important to Israel back in those days. And it is a symbol of cleanliness, or to a cleaning of the soul, to make a covenant with God by removing this thing, going through this whole thing. Anyways, to me, what the dripping pen card is my POI was a submarine mechanic. He worked on submarines. That's why he was stationed in Pearl Harbor. That's why I believe he was in Mare Island, although he never mentioned Mare Island to me before. I learned that in studying the Zodiac case. He did. The only connection he ever had to San Francisco that he told me was the Treasure Island connection. So, anyways, the dripping pen card, in the process of circumcision, there's different methods of doing it, but there is one involved that involves a string, where a string's tied on a certain area and then it cuts through the skin and it's pulled off. There is blood. And it does have, if you look at the pen, it is like it looks like a submarine. It's got panels and rivets and all this stuff. It's not a pen. It looks like a submarine. And also it says, sorry, I haven't written in a while. I had to wash my pen, dot, 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 dot. Well, like, Zodiac was all about wordplay. He based everything he did off of wordplay. And so when he says, sorry to hear your ass is dragging, or, hope you enjoy yourselves. I don't think he said selves. I think he wrote, I hope you enjoy your 5 elves. If you look at it, it doesn't say selves. It looks like an S, but it says 5 elves. So on the dripping pen card, he's saying, he's saying, sorry, I haven't written. I had to wash my penis. It's PEN dot 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 dot. And then he's saying something, if you read the letter that goes along with it, he has 2 different fonts. He has his regular handwriting, and then he has like a bloody Jack the Ripper type font. And when you read that one through and you get to the end, he says, and I can't do a thing with it. And he's saying, you're going to need a good laugh. In my opinion, the person who did this got circumcised as an adult. And that's what the dripping pen card is. Even like if you take the pen and you pop the cap off, it's kind of representing the foreskin getting popped off with the string and the blood. And he thinks it's funny. It's showing his sense of humor. So there's that card. You know, I'm trying to think what else. There was another card where he was talking about something about scuba fins. Do you remember that one? And he
The
had a
card where
set.
he's talking about scuba fins?
Yeah, there was a little letter where he said he had a set of something in his closet, and there was a little thing with a little his name scotch taped to a set of scuba fins somewhere. You don't remember that letter?
I do not, actually. I remember the Scotch tape letter. I don't have it memorized, but I
I
don't
I,
know
I
about
believe
scuba fins, but
I do believe it's the scotch tape letter is what it's called, and I decoded that one too. And I haven't read your book about the Manson connection with Zodiac, but what I don't believe that they were connected, but I do believe that the Scotch tape letter was Zodiac trying to throw people off his trail and shoo them over towards the Manson, because in that letter, when he's saying I have a set in my closet, through my investigation, what I got was they had tape back in those days used to come in like a metal tin, almost like like a reel, like a film reel would be in a
yes.
metal tin. So when you would buy scotch tape, or he mentioned he liked to tape up his victims with friction tape. Well, when I started researching these tins, the scotch tape, he said something like he had a cheap chess set or something in his closet. It's been a while since I read this, but the Scotch tape brand, it was like a checkered pattern, like a checkerboard. And then the friction tape that was popular in those days came in a metal can, and it was called Manson tape. And I believe he was trying to make everybody think, oh, Manson did this. He's encoding this message with this friction tape because it's Manson. And that's what the checkerboard is, and all this stuff. You know, this is how my mind connected it. Now that you have these pieces, I encourage everybody to go look at these things. Do what you will. I hope I'm not afraid of pushback or questioning or reasoning. Please don't get crazy with me, but these are the things I saw. A lot of people did not know that the friction tape was made by a company called Manson. Um, so I'm trying to think of what other letters. Oh, well, the Exorcist card. We'll have to get into that one in private because we decide not to discuss certain things. So the I'll leave that one alone for right now.
Well, firstly, I would like to say, Scott, thank you so much for mentioning Killer on a White Horse and the White Horse Killer Saga, which is a
Yeah.
set of fiction that I created, and it's now available only in audiobook format. There are 3 stories that have been created so far, and you can listen to them 100% online for free. There's a playlist for the White Horse Killer Saga, and I am currently writing the 4th, and that will be made available this year in audiobook format as well. So thanks for bringing that one up. Always
Yeah,
appreciated. Okay, though, Scott,
absolutely.
is there a particular aspect that you would like to explore now? Because we've talked about the letters, we've talked about the greeting cards, we've talked about the some of the unconfirmed crimes.
Okay.
Here is perhaps a bigger question. After the murder of Donna Lass in 1970, what do you think the Zodiac Killer did? Was that the final crime? Do you believe he stopped killing? Do you believe there were additional crimes committed by the Zodiac? And I mean, specifically referring to murders.
Well, I'm going to say something here, and the answer is highly possible.
Okay.
And it would have been. I'm not. Let me think what year that would have been. I would have been 9 years old, and there was a murder of a little girl, or a disappearance of a little girl who was like 3 years old, I think, and her name was Laura Bradbury. And I brought this to the FBI, out in Joshua Tree National Monument near Yucca Valley and 29 Palms Marine Base. A little girl went missing, and her main claim to fame was like she was Ricky Schroeder's second cousin or something like that. Anyways, I lived in Yucca Valley at the time, or it happened. We moved to Yucca Valley not long after that happened. I was 9 when we moved to Yucca Valley. So it might have been a couple years before we actually moved there. I'm not sure. Um, I do believe so part of the psychology of serial killers like Gary Ridgway kind of gave me this connection because you have Lake Berryessa, didn't really fit on any of the Radiant things. It was kind of off the beaten path. And then you had the Badlands card. Well, you start having, Gary Ridgway made all his murders on the Green River. He was called the Green River Killer. Well, GR is Green River, and his initials is Gary Ridgway, which is also GR. And looking at how these people are addicted to the attention, they're absolutely infamous. They're famous, but nobody knows who they are. They're not allowed to be exposed, or they pay a huge penalty for that, obviously. And so I started seeing a connection to the letters LB. There's a whole bunch of connections to that. Now, is there anything to it? I don't know. Did he do anything to this little girl? I don't know. But there was a lot of connections. My person of interest there was a person who disappeared looking for this little girl. His name was Jim Nestor, and he was a pilot, and he was flying out there in the desert over like Johnson Valley, Landers, Lucerne Valley. It's the backside of the San Gabriel Mountains there. And from what I understand, somebody shot him down, or something bad happened. And my person of interest worked with his sister, and it was a big deal. I was highly connected to this whole situation, and it was highly disturbing to me as a kid. It was very upsetting. I can't explain to you how upsetting it was. It was a small town area, and here this thing happened, and the dad wrote a book about it. It just basically destroyed their lives. The mom's dead now, but the dad, Mike, he wrote a book. Mike Bradbury, I think, was the guy, and he wrote his own book. Anyways, I do believe that there's a connection to that. I don't know if he did it, but my gut tells me that that did happen. Um, was it ritual killing? Did it have something to do with a ritual? I believe so. So when I say I can't judge this person, is because I don't know how psychologically there this person is. And I don't know, maybe he's pure evil incarnate. Maybe he's just completely crazy. I don't know. Other murders, that was the only other murder that I linked to him that wasn't a known murder case, but that one does bother me. The other one would be up in it would have been in 1970 or so, up by it happened. It kind of matched his MO. There was a killer up in the Portland, Oregon area, just north of the Columbia River there. There's like Woodland and Lake Merwin and all that. There was a murder of a young girl who only had her shirt removed, as far as I know. She was not sexually assaulted, but she was murdered in the time frame that the Zodiac Killer linked himself to that area at that time through the snowman card and through the dragon card. And another person did get accused of that murder, and I do believe he's on death row, or maybe they already executed. No, I think he's on death row. Her body was found in like some old silo or something like that, and she was definitely stabbed and murdered, but not sexually assaulted, which matches Zodiac thing. That one I do believe possibly was Zodiac, because I'm 100% convinced and positive that he was in that area at that time, based on what I do know of the case, which we'll go into later when you and I decide we want to reveal that stuff, without overwhelming everybody. So those are the only two I can really think of that I really think were probably him.
But in that instance, I'm not familiar with the story that you're talking about. However, there was a conviction, and someone else is currently on death row
Yes.
for that crime.
Yes.
Um, I am not familiar with that story. Can you give me any more clues to her name? It's a Lake Merwin murder.
It was in the Lake Merwin area. Um, I would have to look that up,
Um,
Ned.
what about what year, maybe?
Oh, it would have been probably about 1969.
1969. Let's see. Esther Leibowitz, maybe?
Man, it's been a while. I did the research on that one.
It's okay. We can come back to that one later.
I'll find it, but it'll probably take me probably a half hour to find it. So right now, the best time to do it.
Okay, certainly. And
Make
anything else that you would like to share?
it. And oh my gosh, I mean, I think just unloading this information about that the cards or maps it'd be. I'm interested to see what everybody does with that information and the feedback before I go too deep on anything else, unless you had any other questions. I'm fine with answering anything. Um,
Well, I think
I,
that that's a good place for us to leave it for now. And also, I mean, the final thing to say would be, do you have any plans to make a larger presentation? Are you thinking about writing a book?
absolutely. I mean, my story of how I uncovered this is my real interest and I have my own story attached to this, like everybody else does that's involved with this case. And I do think, with the information that I have, it would seem probably right now very vague for most people based on what I've revealed tonight with what I have. But yes, I think that it would make like a great series to show how he did it, what he did, maybe even if this information is convinces, law enforcement to research this and link this person, there could be an arrest. I don't know. If that happened, then it would just blow up into a huge thing. But I think with the circumcision medical records, if there is a medical record, because there are um, Jewish rabbis, or I forget what they call them, but they are the ones that perform the circumcision, and you can also use a medical doctor to do it. There's got to be some kind of medical record to link this person to that on that date that card was sent. I think it was 1969, November of 69, I think. The airplane registration would link this person somehow to it, even if it wasn't in his name. Some connection to that airplane, this person. There's a whole bunch of things that I can link to this person. I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, I would love it to be a series and tell the world what the heck actually happened. And I would like people to know how I got dragged into this and what it took out of me, what it cost me in my life. I do want people to know that story because, like I told you before, I feel like I got imposter syndrome, that I can never be honest around people of what I know and what happened with this huge, worldwide story. And I have all these connections and answers that I wanted revealed and out of the bag and into the light. Stop hiding in the darkness. Absolutely, I want that story revealed. But I'm not. I'm good at breaking codes and seeing into things and understanding the psychology of a person. And I have an incredible memory for the most part to memorize all these different pieces so that I can put them together. But as far as writing a book, I'm not super talented at something like that, I wouldn't say. So definitely put it out there. If somebody wants to be a ghostwriter who would want to partner on that, I am definitely looking for somebody to do that with. But as far as me sitting down in front of a computer, that's just, my brain does not work that way. I would have to just verbalize like I am here what happened and how I see what he did in my mind, and I can connect all the physical pieces of the evidence that we have and the documentation that we have, and I can show you things that he left for us to connect it together to show you exactly why he did it and what he did, and not just in the persona of the Zodiac. That's just one of his personas, I believe. So there's that.
All right. And Scott Bobbitt, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ned. Have a good night.